jails, gangs and justice.
Created this podcast to help others like myself who have been through the system, who have been through the struggles, to overcome whatever it is you've been through.
So hello everyone, my name's Jarvis Atkinson. I'm from Shepparton, Cummeragunja, born and raised here, and recovering addict as well, This year I've been 7 years clean. So, I was in and out of prison as well for a very long time, and I think I didn't do much jail. Like, I was in and out of prison from 2012 to 2018 every year. And I was in sometimes 3 or 4 times a year. The longest straight I did was like 9 months, but I was in the system since I was like 14, so I was getting locked up, getting charged, and and I had like 17 corrections orders. I breached every single one of them. And it wasn't until 2017, I spent a lot of time homeless as well. I was homeless here in Shepparton for a very long time, sleeping in the park, sleeping down the bush, just surviving, and, I got to a stage in 2017 where I speak about this fire that I had in me from a young fella, and that fire that, used to light me up, and I used to dream and, think of a better day, and, it was starting to go out. And, I got to a stage in 2017 where I was homeless down the streets, the city, Flinders Street. I was living under the pylon bridge there next to Sea Life. I overdosed like probably 15 times all up. But the last time I was in the city homeless, I overdosed 5 times while I was on the streets there for 8 months. And the last time I overdosed, I found myself, I woke up in the St. Vincent's Hospital, had all these tubes hanging out of me, and I looked down at my name tag and it said unknown, and it really just shocked me to think that, I could actually die here, in the city. My family back here, no one knew where I was, and I just thought about my kids. But it was the first time that I overdosed that time, and I actually got a scare out of it, and I remember that name tag, and that said, it was like a big message to me, like, you could actually die down here. No one would know where you are, your kids. And I remember asking God, why do you keep waking me up? Why do I keep getting these chances? And he said, I'm not finished with you yet. And I didn't know what that meant at the time. And so I asked the nurse, I said, how did I get here? She said, you were found face down on the train tracks at Flinders Street Station. And I was like, it just blew my mind, like, no one down there cared about me, no one, and I was on the streets with a lot of people. And so, for the first time, I really felt really alone, and so that wasn't enough to scare me enough to stop. And so I, as soon as the nurse turned her back, I pulled all the tubes out, catheter, heart monitors and the drip and all this stuff, and I jumped up and I walked out of there in the hospital road, and I went straight back to them pylons and I sought out my next shot. And so anyway, I ended up coming back to Shepparton, and I got my first time in 8 years. I got a house, and I had all these good intentions, I'm gonna do the right thing this time. I'm gonna do it for my kids. I got 3 beautiful children, and so I had this beautiful house. And the first couple of months was sweet. My kids came back. They were living with me. They picked their own rooms. It wasn't long after until I opened the door back up to the devil, and that house ended up trashed. Every window was smashed. Every wall had holes in it, and there was dirty syringes right through the house. And I messed it up again. So I was down on myself again, and I ended up committing another serious crime. I committed armed robbery, and I found myself back in the Shepparton cells. And I was ready to die, I was like, I'm either going to die, I'm going to go back to jail for a long time. And I was starting to think maybe it's best I just stop coming in and out of my kids' lives, and all these promises, all these broken promises. And so I'll just share this bit because it's pretty powerful. So I'm in the Shepparton cells, and, now I'm at this stage where the court's hands are tied. The corrections don't want nothing to do with me. Legal aid, sick of coming in and out of the cells to see me. And trap door comes down and the police officer sticks his head in the trap and he goes, "Jarvis, there's someone here to see you." And it surprised me because I thought, my mum said she'll never come again. And so I was surprised, and I got up and I walked in the visitor's box, and in walks this drug and alcohol worker from Odyssey House. And she has an application. She says, "Sign this application, go to Odyssey House and give it all you got, give it 100%. So I was in Odyssey House in 2015. I went there, I was on the methadone program. I was on 135 milligrams. I come right down, took me 8 months. I got off the dome. I left the program, thought I was recovered, relapsed, and so 2017, I find myself in the cells, and she says, "Sign this application, go to Odyssey." And I said, "Nah, no way," because I knew it was going to take years. It wasn't going to be just months, after using so long, it's going to take years. In 2015, it was Christmas time. My son come to see me. He was 11 in Odyssey. And in the front reception, we made a tree out of trees, if that sounds scattered. But there was this tree in the reception, and visitors could come and they could write on a piece of paper a wish or a prayer. And my son come and he wrote on this little piece of paper, he wrote, "All I want is for my dad to get off the drugs forever." And he hung it on that tree, and I sort of pushed that down because I couldn't make that come true. And she reminded me, she said, "Do you remember that prayer that wish your son made?" And it lit that fire back up in me and gave me the strength to sign that application and go back to Odyssey. And this time I went back there, I had this unexplainable determination to give it 100%. And so I ended up going back to Odyssey. I've done 3 years in there, I graduated. I'm here today, 7 years clean, jail free, going back into prison, sharing my story. I was saying to Dimmer before, I found myself standing in Port Phillip, Scarborough North, where I was once locked up in there, and I was telling my same story to the men in there. And now I'm on the board at Odyssey House, and I'm back in community, and I'm doing a lot of good things. So I hope that just inspires you a bit. What we went through is not our downfalls. That's our strength. Don't let anyone ever tell you different, because you've got something that no one else has got, and that's lived experience. And I know that gets chucked around a lot, but it's so empowering when you really activate that and really dream of what you actually can become, and you all have a responsibility to give it back. Once you get to that stage, give it back and save someone, save a life, empower someone. Yeah, so I'll leave that at that. Thanks for coming, brother.
Yeah, thanks for having me, everyone. I'm Jacob Little. I'm co-founder of About Time for Justice. I'm 33 years old. I'm based on the Gold Coast. So I come down here last week to Melbourne, to Victoria, and come down to Shepparton on Monday. So we do a lot of work in the prison systems. When I was 17 years old, I went through Brisbane Boys Yard. So the equivalent to that down here is like Malmesbury, Parkville, Turana. I think Malmesbury and Turana closed down now. They got Cherry Creek or Parkville or whatever. So when I was there at Brisbane Boys Yard, I suffered SA at the hands of a prison officer. So he came into my cell more than once, and I suffered the SA. So I remember it was a pretty hard time in my life. My father was in the New South Wales prison system serving a 16.5-year prison sentence. So I grew up in housing commission, a lot of domestic violence, a lot of drinking. Everyone where I lived in the house, those like their mums or dads or brothers was fucking in the boob or, inactive addiction. So by the time I got to 17, I grew up visiting my dad at prison. I grew up going to jail visits, having the screws, have the sniffer dogs run over private areas. Even more embarrassing, over like my stepmother and my grandmother. And that just didn't happen to me. That happened to all the prisoners' loved ones. The screws are dirty dogs. I don't like them still to this day, obviously, for what I've been through and how I was treated over the years. So my dad's also a survivor. He suffered his SA at his local primary school. So we help people that have been through institutional child abuse in boys' homes, girls' homes, foster cares, docks, any youth detention centres, any churches or church-run institutions, any missions, reserves, community-based groups, any sporting teams, Girl Scouts, Scouts. So yeah, in 2000 and it was about 6 or 7 years ago, I started sharing my story about what I've been through. And I remember it was probably one of the hardest things that I ever had to do. At the time, I was an active member of a motorcycle club in Queensland. I was the president of a chapter up there. So I had to step away from my whole crew. And one of the main reasons that I stepped away from my whole crew was Dad was getting out from his 16.5-year prison sentence and he had NAs. So I was actually in the same club as my father. So yeah, I sort of grew up looking up to him in jail, and then sort of through that as well, I was like, fuck, I want to be like my dad. And my dad was in the club. So, it kept progressing, and then sort of, the reason that I got out was the same reason that I got in. Just become so normalised for me. So Dad's parole conditions were that he was on a non-association. So my plan was to actually tell the jacks, tell parole or whatever I was going to be out, but I wasn't going to be out. That I don't know if I was under investigation at the time or they fought ahead and thought he's going to say he's out. But worst case scenario would be I would have put my dad back in jail. Best case scenario would be I wouldn't allow to see him again. I was like, fuck this. I just spent ever since I was 10 years old visiting jails, having jail phone calls, rocking up to jail visits, taking my little brother and sister down. So we were based on the Gold Coast and my dad was in jail mostly in Sydney. And if you aren't from up that way, it's like a 10-hour drive. So we used to drive 10 hours all the way down there. It's like a 2-day trip, cost money to get there. You have to stay overnight. You have to fucking listen. The kids were only little, it's a big drive. And if you didn't drive, you had to fly. So for many years, we just had to do that. And it was just, what we done. So I was like, fuck this, I'm out. But it wasn't just as easy as stepping away. Because when I suffered my SA, I turned 18 in jail. So on my 18th birthday, I got transferred from Brisbane Correctional Centre. I'd done all my time in Queensland. I went to Arthur Gorrie Correctional Centre. I got out. I was dirty on the world. I was drinking, I was taking drugs, I got involved in the street crew. And then I was back on bail, back on probation, back on parole. And this is when I was sort of in the street gang, and then I nommed up to the club. And at that time, for a young kid, when your dad's in jail, I was looking for a void to fill, with the older men, with the brotherhood. Friday nights were pretty good at the clubhouse, drinking, partying, there was girls. Stayed there all weekend. It was sort of like a safe place, For me, that's how I felt at home. But then they brought in some anti-association laws in Queensland. So they were called the Vlad laws. So if you got pinched under these laws, you're looking at 20 plus years straight off the bat. So I got pinched under these laws. It was just for an affray. So it was just a fight at the gym. Me and my co, we were at the gym, and there was 2 other members from a different club, and we just had a fight. If it was someone in public, our shirts come off, it would have looked scary. But if you're in that life, it was honestly just a one-on-one fight. I got charged a fray plus a Vlad, went straight to a bikie unit, so everyone was on 22-hour-a-day lockdowns, no TV in the cell. Only contact to the outside world was 1 6-minute phone call a day and 1 non-contact visit a week. And it was pretty hard, Dad was about 10 years into his 16.5 years prison sentence. I'm sitting in 22-hour-a-day lockdowns. We only got 2 hours out of the yard, no TV, it was boring as fuck. I remember the first prison visit, my mum rocked up, and it was a boxy. So boxy's glass in between. I had a shaved head at the time. We didn't see any sun for fucking months. I was white as fucking shaved head, looking putrid. I just remember seeing the look on my mum's face. She was just trying to hold it together. And it brings a tear to my eye thinking about how I felt at that time. It was shit. My mum's always been a soldier for me, rocking up to prison visits. So when my mum and dad broke up, when I was younger, there was domestic violence and things like that. Mum and dad broke up. But my mum got together with somebody else who was in jail at the same time as me. So mum actually was living at the Gold Coast at the time. We're at Woodford Correctional Centre at this time. And mum used to drive 2 hours one way to come see us, 2 hours back. She was holding the fort down. She was paying the bills. She sold her house and moved closer to us so she could come visit us. So, having my family around me now is very important. So when I stepped away, I'd pushed all my old friend circle away, guys I grew up playing footy with, guys I went to school with. All I was doing was just hanging out with guys who were hustling, who were in clubs, who were just crimming on in and out of jail. So it was hard for me to step away. It was so lonely too. And when I stepped away, I was still on. It didn't just happen overnight. I was on bail for 2 or 3 years. And the lawyer recommended for me to do something to keep me out of jail. And that was drug and alcohol counselling. and anger management. So my last criminal charge was somebody called me out on Facebook, said a bad word, and like looking back on it now, it was just all my ego. Like if somebody calls you out on Facebook, like is it the end of the world if you don't get them? Probably not. But to me in that time, I had such the ego living in that life. I was like, I have to get him. So I seen him and I got him, and then he dobbed on me. So I remember rocking up to the anger management, and we just kept going over that situation. What happens if it happens again? And I was like, I probably would do it again. So I rocked back in like 2 or 3 times later, still had a bad head, still didn't want to take any of it in. She asked me again. I was like, fuck, I don't want to keep coming. This is torture. I've just had to go through court, paying for lawyers. You know, at this time, Dad had just been released too. He was living 5 hours away, and I had to basically sort of drive from where he was, because I actually moved down to him to support him when he got out of jail. But it was like, it was getting too hard because I had to keep coming back every couple of weeks. It was before COVID, so there was no Zooms. So essentially I had to move away from my dad to fucking try and fix my fuck ups. So 3rd or 4th time, she's like, oh, what would you do if this happened again? And I was like, I'll probably go somewhere where there's no cameras so they don't see anything. And then sort of, 6, 7 times in, I was like, you know what? Why? She's like, why don't you just take a breath and think about it? And I was like, all right. I was just thinking about a situation in my head. Somebody says something bad to me in the street. Take a deep breath. I don't cave them. I just walk away. And I started thinking, just growing up in that life, just attacking people and getting people, it just becomes so normalized to me that by the time I got to that age, it was just ingrained in me. Anyway, so I just sort of started thinking, fuck, I'll just walk away. I haven't been put in that situation yet, but I've definitely been put in positions where I've been angry and wanted to attack people. And I just thought, is it really worth going back? So yeah, I suppose Dad got out and I started sharing my story, and then our family got back together. So we had intergenerational trauma, incarceration in our family. So me and Dad broke that off. We stopped that. We started our business in 2020. I was encouraged to start studying law. As you know, when you go through the criminal justice system, it's fucking hard. Lawyers are dodgy. It's hard to understand what the lawyers are saying. I've seen so many guys, including my dad. He got offered to plead, I think, at the time, and I think he would have got an 8 on the bottom and maybe a 10 on the top, and he said no, and then ended up getting a 16.5 year straight prison sentence. So I want to get my law degree under my belt. I only study like 1 trimester, like 1 unit, like every sort of trimester, and it's very hard. But yeah, so I started my business, and I started traveling around Australia and start having yarns. So yeah, Jarvis invited me to come down and share my story. So yeah, I just wanted to share my story and what we do with everyone here. And so anything else you want to share?
Yeah, no, just, you've been going into a lot of prisons, and, we've been to a few different rehabs. This is the 2nd time we've been back here now. And, I was really surprised on actually how many people, found the confidence to actually talk up.
Yeah.
That might have went through institutional abuse, because it's real, and there's a lot of people out there that, deal with it, and some people just cop it, and just deal with it themselves, but through Jacob, he's got a team of lawyers and a team of people that can help people, and I like to say, I don't know if this is the right wording, but, moving from that victim to a survivor of institutional abuse, and I think you can, until you take the power back and do something about it, and claim your compo, hold these people to account. I think you can stay in like a victim sort of state, but once you start taking that power back, you can move into a survivor.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, it does.
Yeah.
100%.
That's what I love about what you do, brothers, and we're helping people, and it's really good what you do, and using what you went through to empower and strengthen other people. I think that's massive, and yeah.
Thanks, brother.
No worries, my brother.
Yeah, so I suppose what we do specifically with survivors is, if somebody, like just say for example, Jarvis or somebody in this room wanted to have a yarn with me about something that they went through. So this is for anything that happened under the ages of 18 in an Australian institution. So any of them ones that I sort of listed before. So someone would reach out to me via like social media or give us a call, email us, then we'll sort of sit down with them, run through where it happened. I'm just going to use my example because I know my example. So mine happened in Brisbane Boys Yard. I was under the age of 18. My perpetrator was a screw, but it doesn't have to be a screw. It could be like another kid or a worker on the ground. So we'd sit down, have a yarn, sort of see, where it happened, who the perpetrator was, how old you were, just get a sort of initial sort of little intake going on. Once you get to that stage, we'll be able to sort of say if what we can do next. That part is always really hard. I like to say we need to stop the perpetrator's violence by breaking the survivor's silence, because there's so many survivors that suffer in silence. Many survivors, don't come and tell their story for many years because there's so much guilt, shame, and embarrassment. My family suffered intergenerational trauma. So my nan and pop, they were stiffs, pure stiffs. So my pop was a chippy, then become builder. Then my nan was stay-at-home nan, and she had like just an admin job. So he had two brothers. Both of them brothers went on to go to university. One of them had two kids. They went to university. So dad got SA, they didn't. Dad ended up doing a 16.5-year prison sentence, got involved in the outlaw motorcycle gang. And then from there, for me, I grew up thinking that was all normalized. So, for some families, this intergenerational trauma comes from, maybe from mum or dad not knowingly doing it, but because that perpetrator affected them when they were young and they haven't spoken up about what they've been through, you bottle it up. A lot of lads, including myself, got on the drugs so fucking bad, wigging out. I remember some of my worst days in addiction, looking under the doors, looking out the curtain, like looking at the cameras 24/7. Yeah, I fucking hate that I was in that state, and I didn't even realize sort of why I was doing it. I still deal with my trauma today. I've been triggered like in the last couple of months, but I have steps that I use, maybe from that drug and alcohol counsellor, making sure that I reach out to like a mental health practitioner, or that's like a psych or, counsellor, or even just your mate. I reach out to my dad and debrief quite a lot, because sometimes I get bad head noise. So if I don't talk about it, that head noise just gets hectic. Sometimes if I don't start thinking positive thoughts straight away, I'll just start twisting up. I use like training a lot for my mental health now as well. So for survivors, if they wanted to come forward and have that yarn, more than happy to sort of, do it whatever way anyone wants to.
Jails, gangs and justice.
Created this podcast to help others like myself who have been through the system, who have been through the struggles, to overcome whatever it is you've been through